Hello, everybody. So, my two poems are Rasputin Aria by Sharon Olds and Nord-Sud by Michael Palmer, presented by Gabriela Renteria. To begin, I'll start off with a summary of Rasputin by Sharon Olds. I was quite confused when I initially read this poem, so I made a quick Google search and found that Rasputin was a Russian mystic. He was a peasant who made his way up the hierarchy due to these healing abilities people believed he had. This poem is about his death, and it goes into depth on how they attempted to murder him, didn't succeed, and then essentially murdered him. Now onto the analysis. Olds creates a disgusted and dreary tone throughout this poem. We can tell by her choice of words that she dislikes Rasputin, as we see in this quote: "When I think of my country rendering and being rendered, when I think of our body politic, its head of wrath with an orange flame for hair." There is no set rhyme scheme. I would categorize this poem as a narrative because Olds is portraying the death of Rasputin and how traumatized she is by it, or how these thoughts or knowledge of him are unwanted. There are no stanzas, it is written continuous. A quote I found powerful in this poem was, "And then to be killed one way and it did not take, and then another, then stabbed and drowned in a sack." I chose this quote because it captured how unwanted Rasputin was in Russia, that they murdered him after some failed attempts. Now on to Nord-Sud by Michael Palmer. So first things first, I grasped that this poem was written in memory of Pierre Reverdy. However, I had no idea who this was and or if the title of this poem was closely related to him. After doing a bit of research on Google, I found that Nord-Sud means north-south in French. Pierre Reverdy was a French poet who founded a journal called Nord-Sud. After reading the poem a few more times, I was finally able to make connections between Palmer's different elements. He's talking about these butterflies throughout this poem. In the beginning, Palmer is listing a bunch of places in Italy in which he's counting the butterflies. He then switches to counting the butterflies in Paris. There is quite a change in tone and imagery between Italy and France. After realizing he's talking about making a trip, I see that the title Nord-Sud is actually referring to a train company in France. And because this was only a brief overview of Palmer's poem, I'll go more in depth by analyzing different components of it. So, Michael Palmer starts off Nord-Sud using repetition. Repetition is oftentimes used to make an emphasis. I guess we could say Palmer is making an emphasis that our setting begins in Italy. He also continuously mentions the number 3 throughout the poem. There were always 3. There's a bit of descriptive language helping form the imagery. For the first half, when Palmer is going through Italy, the tone and imagery seems to be lighthearted and almost carefree, just because he's naming all these well-known landmarks, or I'm not too sure what you'd call them because I'm not too familiar with them. But however, once the poem shifts to France, we see this shift in tone. The tone becomes heavy and destructive. I counted all the butterflies in Paris, then as they caught fire one by one. He slowly starts to draw to the conclusion of Pierre Reverdy's death by having these butterflies finish their trip and essentially die. Nord-Sud is a narrative poem, so the meanings of each line continue on to the next because it's essentially being a story being told. There is no set rhyme scheme as often one thinks about when thinking of poetry. However, it does have two couplets, which are a unit of two lines that end rhyming, and this is the basic unit of English poetry. These two couplets are 3 perched amidst the eternal dust. I counted to 3 because I felt I must. And then lighting the banks not of Tiber but of Seine, I counted the butterflies in Paris then. So a quote that stood out to me from this poem was, "And the butterflies have ended their day in the